Rolla, back in 1971 in April, John Stockard came and talked to both you and Ethel about a lot of experiences and about your background and everything. We have that at the park, and that will stay there. And what I want to do today is get some other things I thought of that John didn't ask the two of you, and also Halley. But I also want to have an opportunity to sort of get a perspective on your life here, since you will be moving soon. First of all, I want to say that I'm talking to Rolla Burkholder and his wife Ethel and their friend Halley Young. All three of these people have been here in the interior area for quite some time. About 40 years? For you and longer than that?
I've been here since, I've been here for 47 years.
47
since Rolla
years.
and I were married.
That's right. There has been 7 years passed since the last tape.
I've been here for 67
67 years. Wonderful. How long have you been here, Halley?
I was born and raised here.
You were born and raised here. Well, that's great. You can add a perspective to it that none of us
Of
can.
course, that 67 years was just out here. Not
Yeah.
I know. Well, I listened to the tape that John made of you, and I know that you came from Valley Springs. Is that in Pennsylvania?
No, that's in South Dakota.
Oh, that's in South Dakota. Oh, there's a Valley Springs, South Dakota.
Yeah,
Where
just
was that? Where you were born?
No, I was born on Lower Brewer Indian Reservation.
So you're a native South Dakota.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And you came from Valley Springs in 1899 or 1889?
1893.
1893.
99 is just a kid.
When were you born? Do you know what's your birth date?
July 3rd, 1893.
Well, you didn't come from Valley Springs in 1893.
No, I didn't ask me that.
Yeah.
You were born in 1893.
I was born in 1893 on Lower Brewer Reservation.
Uh-huh. And then your first home was in Valley Springs
Yes.
that you remember?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Was it a homestead?
It was my grandfather's homestead.
Well, your father was a hotel man. Was he a hotel man around Valley Springs? Was there a
Yes.
large enough
Yeah,
community
he
there?
started the hotel business, but he came to Valley Springs long before that. Well, he was out there before he and Mother were married.
Well, now they came out here to homestead.
Yeah.
And why did they leave Valley Springs to come
Well,
out
he
here?
was a hotel man. He just had the itching foot. He kept getting farther west all the time. He went from Valley Springs to a hotel in Irene, South Dakota. And then he went from there to Presho. And from Presho he came out here and took a homestead.
Well, when he was an interior, he didn't come out here to work on a hotel or manage a hotel, did he?
No.
He came out to homestead?
When he first came out here, he didn't know. He just came out, but he stayed in the hotel business. He was, while he was still on the homestead here, after he proved up, he had run a hotel at Kadoka. Then he had a hotel at Belfouche.
Well, that's great.
Family lived there as their home.
The family lived in where?
Where?
In interior?
Yeah, where?
Okay. But he had these hotels and they were managed by other people. But
Yeah, and
they
then
were his
afterwards,
hotels.
he ran a little hotel here in Interior.
I was wondering if he ever did. He did have a hotel.
Yeah.
You didn't come out originally with the family?
No, I didn't come to the next year.
Uh-huh.
I'm from Presho.
Right. I imagine you came on the railroad?
Yeah, they came on the railroad out here the year that the railroad kept first hauled. Well, and it's inside of construction work. I mean, when it started hauling stuff, that was the first lumber that built the house was brought in for the claim.
Ethel was
And
telling me
then
about
the Mother and Irene came out and stayed in the claim, and he and I stayed there running that hotel in Presho. And he'd come out every little while and establish residence, and I'd stay there, and he'd come back. And then finally he came out. They sold the hotel there, and he came out, but I stayed there and worked.
Was it a regular quarter section? that he
Yes,
homesteaded. And it's now,
where Levon Green
Levon
lives.
Green lives, that house there.
Yeah, it's in that quarter
But now
there.
that quarter section, did it go all the way down to the river?
Oh, no, the quarter section, the road that angles through it would be just a square quarter.
Just a square corner there. But down back where the Saunders,
Yeah,
Margaret Saunders
so-
is, and Dwayne,
Yeah, clear
Ruth
down to
Lester.
clear down to the cemetery.
clear down to the cemetery, and just a square lot there. Now, at that time, was Interior Inn down by the river? Had it moved up?
The interior was moved up
Did
when the
it?
railroad came.
Uh-huh. That's why
So
Interior
they
was
were-
moved.
When he first came out on the homestead, it was still down on the river.
Uh-huh.
First he came out to file on it. But when he lived, by the time he come out here to live, after the railroad got through, why, then the town had moved up to where it is at present.
Did they always keep that homestead, or did they have another one besides that?
No, my brother had another one, but he didn't.
Besides running the hotels and having his land, did your father have any other kind of livelihood?
No,
When you came
well, he
in,
had this one that he, in the interior there, he had this
Hotel.
little hotel, and then afterwards, for several years, had a big store there in the corner, grocery store.
do you remember anything about that day when you came out here on the train? Do you remember your feelings about what you saw? Were you happy to move? Or were you anxious to help your mother get settled?
Just a kid, I was used to working and
You-
didn't make any difference, didn't think anything of. Well, of course, I came alone. I stayed there and worked. I'd been out, stayed a week with them, visited them, and so I knew what it was like.
What was the town like then when you came in 1908? I think that's when you came.
I came in 1908.
Yeah. What was the town like then? Was it a fairly thriving little town?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It was very good. Quite a lot, well, right at that time. Of course, there weren't so many, but it had 2 stores and a bank and a drugstore and a hotel and garage. No, they didn't have a garage. There wasn't any garage. And a livery barn and things like that. Building up.
Was there a bridge at that time between the White River
It was
and
built.
over the White
It
River?
was built right after that.
Uh-huh.
After the town got up here, they built it. I think the Pine Ridge, I believe it was Pine Ridge and the railroad and the town. I suppose, I don't know what part of the,
Was Canada a large town at that time?
Canada never was very large.
It never was very large. What about Inlay?
Emily was smaller. He had
It was always a small little town. Hallie, did you have something to say? At any time, if either one of you ladies think of something that would be good at that point, be sure and add it in. I just was feeling it would be less confusing if I asked each of you. specific
1908.
questions.
What year did they build the bridge that washed out up west?
Well,
It's in that record there. That
Is it in the record there?
Yeah.
A few of those facts.
I was away at school, you
Yeah,
see, when that
it was after
all took place.
the bridges. They were building that bridge when I came, I think.
Well, I remember when we came back from school and they came in town to get us.
Yeah.
The horses were scared to death of the bridge.
Yeah.
And they had to lead them one by one across and then pull the buggy across and hook them
Oh, I
up.
bet. They probably had never been on a bridge,
No,
so
they
they were
hadn't.
frightened of
I
it.
didn't know.
I don't remember when they completed, but
Right, 'cause
I
I was
know
away at school, you see,
they
at
had
that time.
it completed enough. They had big box built out from the bridge at each pier, filled with rock for breaking icebreakers.
Mhm.
When it's breaking,
Well, that river can really be treacherous at times. I've seen it
and,
that way.
well, and I hauled rocks from the Badland up there to fill those piers. So, but now what year that? I imagine it was 1908 or 9. That had
Yeah.
to be.
probably was. Yeah, it's in here. I'm not sure, in fact, maybe Ethel could find it for us.
I was going to see.
Did they ever try a ferry across the river?
Ferry.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah, before the town ever moved, there was a ferry down there at the old town.
Uh-huh. But when you moved here, the old town was just a ghost town down by
Yeah,
the
there's
river.
only one building left. Well, no, the Johnson Place, the old town, Johnson Place
Uh-huh.
was there, but most of the town was built up, it's pretty near a quarter mile from the old Johnson Place, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The town, part of the Johnson, the post office was down in Johnson's there, and a store
Uh-huh.
at the old town.
When I
And then the rest was up there, several buildings. Up there, a butcher shop and a saloon and different things. But when I came, there was only one building left up there, a little old shack. I don't know what it was.
This says that the bridge was built in 1910
10, yeah.
by, on the Jackson-Pennington County line. It was funded principally by the Milwaukee Railroad. The Interior Township contributed $250 toward the expense. The bridge was washed out in 1942.
Oh, that must have been quite a flood year then for it to be washed out. Well, you spent most of your child or young adulthood then working on the ranch and helping there.
I was going to say, when he was talking about staying in Presho, he stayed there and ran the hotel while his folks came out here.
Well, there was never extended period, just for weekends while Dad would
Weekends.
come.
Was
But
it?
you moved back to Presho, didn't you, for
Yes,
a while?
He ran the hotel, and we came out here, and then we went back there for a year or two.
Did you sell the place in Interior when you went back to
No.
Presho? You didn't, you kept it.
Oh, wait a minute. No, we sold it, didn't we? Yeah, we sold it to Seegers, by golly.
So at that time, from that time forward, then that area was no longer belonged to your family, that quarter
No.
section. So when you came back here after you had moved back to Presho, which in my records is 1916, when you came back, you were quite a bit older, and I was wondering when you met Ethel.
Oh, I didn't meet Ethel for. Well, I saw her at a roundup.
Do you remember what year that was?
Well, she was about, I guess, as I remember, about 16 years old. She was over to a roundup with some friends of hers over at Walmley. And I must have been interested because I asked somebody who that was, and they said that's a school teacher's daughter over at Walmley. Then I didn't meet her again until
For a long time.
long years after it.
See, he was a bachelor until he was almost 40 years old.
Is that right? You were?
That's when I was married. I was 40 years old.
Oh, that's fantastic. What did you do between the time you came back from Presho after 1916
When I
until
came
you were
out here,
married? Did you homestead yourself?
I stayed with them the first time. I stayed with them and started farming there on a homestead.
Back here in Interior?
Yeah, their homestead the first year. And then he sold out and went back there and run the hotel for a year or two. And I went back there and stayed with them there.
So then what did you do after that?
And then we came back here to Interior. They started a business up in town there. And I went on a ranch down on the river there where the old 6L was. It's right straight south of town now.
That's where Doug and Esther.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
right beyond Ender. Well,
that's
Ender's part,
beautiful
is our
down
part of it, yes.
Is there anything left of the old building out there?
No, it burnt down while somebody was living there.
But that was your first place by yourself, independently?
Yes, I stayed down there and started farming and picking up a few cows. And then from there I went to another place down the river and lived there for, maybe 2 years, and then I came over here.
Over here you mean your home here?
Yes, well, my
the land
place
here.
is this land, yes. Well, not in this place, but Hattonhouse House as I started.
Did you ever want to go into the hotel business, or
No.
did you know you wanted to be a farmer rancher?
always said that.
Well, I imagine you have lived out in this part of the country for quite a while, and especially this area, not exactly where your house is, but you probably had another house somewhere out
Oh gosh.
here. Several?
Well, the first year I came out here, I got the place, I came over here, put up hay, lived in just at a camping outfit tent, put up hay, and when late that fall, I happened to get it through my thick head that, my gosh, I had to ford the river with that hay down here. That would be right straight south, north here. And there'd be plenty of times when I couldn't get across the river with hay. I'd have to build up a supply and everything. I says, well, it's easier to take the cattle to the hay than just the hay to the cattle. So I brought them over here, and I lived all winter in the tent out here in the wintertime.
My goodness.
and brought the cattle over here, did a little wildcat leasing so I could run them over here. And the next year that worked so nice that of course I was doing a lot of work down on farms, riding and helping them down there at that time, and doing a lot of riding for others out in this country, breaking horses, one thing and another.
You see, Farnham, John Farnham was Halley's grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
So he's known Halley since.
So
For years, and well, she was here.
The next
from
year I
birth.
decided the same thing. The tent was so nice. I just started a little bit in the fall, and then I leased it. Took a winter lease on a fellow over here. I had a log house about 2-3 miles over there. I was all right, but I didn't lease through the government. I leased direct from him, and along in January the government chased me off because I didn't have a legal lease.
Uh-huh.
They weren't allowed to lease straight from the Indians. So I came back and I was going to build a house. I dug a cellar and caved it over and just lived in that for a month or two till I got a little house built. It was just a one-room house. And that was in
1917.
Yes. And I just lived in that about 6 months. That shows about, used to be about a different house. I lived about 6 months, and then I got notice I was going to be drafted. So I sold the house and neighbor down here, and sold the cattle. All I kept was 3 head of horses and my machinery and household.
You had no one to really run your place while you were gone.
No, it was just, I hadn't started farming at all. I just grading grass, hay.
I also in the tape was listening to when you used to sell milk and also haul water for the town of
Well,
Interior. Was that later on
that's
after
when
the war?
the town was there, yes. They didn't have any waterworks, you see.
Uh-huh.
Yes, and I hauled water.
This was after the war?
Oh, no, that was long
Before
before
the
the
war.
war.
That was when he first
That's
came out, I
That's
think.
when I
I
first
see.
came,
When you were pretty young.
Yeah,
16 and 17.
In there, somewhere.
You didn't start, when did you start your mail route as a circuit?
44,
Star route?
1944.
1944. And that was after you and Ethel were married.
Oh, yes.
So that sort of became part of your livelihood at that time.
Yeah, by that time, of course, I was milking a lot of cows and farming and ranching.
What was your complete circuit on the Star route?
120 miles to start with.
How many years did you do it?
28 years.
28 years. Oh, that's wonderful. When did you retire from the Postal Service?
19.
You went in 44.
Yeah, 28 years. 1972 would be, wouldn't it? Yeah, because my...
What, Ethel, what year were you and Rolla married?
I have to stop thinking.
Or how long have you been married?
It
That will
was
help.
47 years.
1933.
1933. And you
1933.
caught yourself a bachelor who was 40 years old.
That's
huh?
right.
Yes.
She shocked the whole
I don't know
community.
whether she got in the wrong side of the moon or if she slipped up from a blind side, one
I
or
think
the
she
other.
probably knew a good thing when she saw it. But Ethel, I know from what you've told me that you came out with your parents and they were teachers and you came
Yes.
to Wambly. How old were you then?
11 years old.
You were 11 at that time.
Yeah.
Where were you born?
Surprise, Nebraska. 1902.
1902. And because of growing up with teachers, I can understand why you went to the profession of teaching yourself.
I guess I grew up with the idea that that's what I would be.
Uh-huh.
Sort of accepted it as what I...
Did your parents work together in this school in Wombly? Were they?
Yes. See, in those days, when we came, it was not called Wombly.
Mhm.
It had no post office had been established. It was a government station. And it was Lipscamp was the name of the place. Then there was just the day school, which was a one-room school of the first 6 grades. And my father was the school teacher, but Mother had her teaching duties also. She cooked the meal every day for the children, a hot meal at noon, and one of her duties was to teach the girls to cook. So the older girls would come over to the house and help her prepare the meal. Also, the government sent out yards and yards of goods, hickory, blue and white striped hickory, to make, I believe, shirts for the boys and dresses for the girls.
Mm-hmm.
And then her responsibility was to teach the girls to sew. So they would come over to the house, and she would teach them to make their own dresses.
So she had a lot of instruction that went on in your home too. So
Yes.
you were observing all this.
There was a great
also.
deal of instruction that went on in the home.
Well, since you were only 11 years old, your father also taught you, I imagine. You were in the same
No,
school?
I had finished the 6th grade when we moved out here. We lived in Gregory County on a homestead. And I had finished the 6th grade in the rural school there, a country school. My health was not the best, and then I had 2 little sisters, just 15 months apart. The youngest, Rose, was just 6 weeks old when we came. So the folks decided, since I was an avid reader anyway and did a lot of reading, that it wouldn't hurt me just to stay out of school. They didn't want to send me away. There was no public school to go to at
It would
that
probably
time.
been a long ways for you to board
Yes,
out.
it would have. So they decided that I would stay home.
So they sort of taught you at home and you taught
Yes,
yourself?
I just stayed out of school, and of course I learned. Mother was always having me write stories or something of that sort of incidentally teaching. And for 2 years then I did not attend school.
You mentioned that you had been ill. Had you had a childhood illness?
No, well, I'd had a very severe measles in those days,
Oh, yes.
measles and whooping cough,
Mm-hmm.
and had pneumonia, and I was just kind of undernourished, I suppose. I don't know just what it was, but nothing real serious like rheumatic fever or anything like that.
Were you happy about moving from Surprise, Nebraska out there to Wombly or to the government station?
We came from Surprise to Gregory County, Herrick, South Dakota,
Okay.
to the homestead.
I see.
My father at that time had been farming his father's farm in Nebraska, but due to various circumstances, he went to work. He had sort of taken a vacation from teaching and had gone to work for the Marshall Nursery Company. So he traveled and sold nursery goods up in the homestead country in southeastern South Dakota and became interested in taking out a homestead, which he did. And he wrote to my mother and asked her if it was all right with her if he took out a homestead. But before she could write an answer, in those days you didn't call on the telephone, before he could write an answer, she could write an answer. She had another letter saying he had filed on a homestead. So we moved to South Dakota. when I was 5. And yes, I was excited about coming.
Well, you moved to your first homestead when you were 5, and then you moved out here when you were
And
11.
then, yes, then he went back to teaching. He and Mother both went back to teaching because the homestead did not produce. And it was a financial problem there.
Well,
So
it seems
they
to
both-
me, the 160-acre Port River section just wasn't enough to make
No.
it in
Still
this
isn't.
country. No, it's
No,
not.
it was not.
My family were homesteaders in southeastern Colorado, and my grandfather put up with the same type of a situation.
A similar
Very similar.
area.
Mm-hmm. It was dryland
Yes.
farming and
That's right.
that type of thing too. So you grew up with basically a feeling for teaching. Where did you begin to develop your experience so you could teach? Did you go to school finally when you were older?
When I
To get a
was 14
teaching
then, I
degree?
went down to Surprise and stayed with my aunt down there, who was also 7th and 8th grade teacher. And I took both the grades then that year because I was 14 and old enough. So finished the 2 grades. Then I came home. Then the next year I went to Kadoka to high school and stayed. But I had to be away from home to do that, so my folks decided since I had to be away from home, I might just as well go to Spearfish Normal. At that time, they gave the high school subjects, the teaching subjects, methods and so forth, right in with the high school work if you wanted to take it. So they had just the 4 years, which corresponded to high school, and 2 years above was all they taught in Spearfish Normal. at
And is that
time.
now Black Hill State?
Yes, that's now Black Hill State. So I went up there and for 3 years then.
Where did you live while you were there?
At the dormitory.
At the dormitory?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And so that gave you the experience of a normal, what did they call that type of a degree then?
I didn't get a degree. It didn't go quite 3 years.
That's like a finishing school in a way,
Well,
but a little bit more than that.
more than that.
Yeah.
It was a teacher's college, is what
Mhm.
it was. But in those days, if you were 18 and could pass the state teacher's examination, you could teach school.
Mhm. Sure.
So that's what I did.
Mhm.
At summer school, I took the teacher's examination. In the summer I was 17. I was 18 in August. But I passed and got a 3rd grade certificate. That was the first one you'd get.
Mhm.
And
So then did you start
so
teaching in some
I
of the
started
country
teaching
schools?
when I was 18. In
Where was
that
your
fall,
where was your first school?
north of Belvedere, about 12 miles, at East Indian Creek School. It was in the Griswold and Bradley community. I had 7 pupils,
My goodness. How long were you there?
1 year.
Just 1 year?
Then I went back to school, Spearfish.
Uh-huh.
And
How long did you go back to school to Spearfish? Just another year?
just another year and a summer.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And then did you start out and teach again in another country school after that?
Well, I quit teaching for a couple of years.
Mhm.
Then I went back to teaching in Wambley.
Were your parents still in Wobbly?
Yes, they were. My father was in the Indian Service for 6 years. And then there were so many people came in from Iowa and east farther to take either to lease or buy this land on the reservation.
Mhm.
That there became such a population here, they had to have some public schools.
Sure.
And so my father was one of the instigators in getting the public school system started. And there were, Mr. Garner was one of the others, and Mr. Hersher, and I don't remember who the other people were that were on that first school board, but the governor then appointed my father as the superintendent of the schools. He quit the the Indian service then and went in as superintendent of the public schools.
Now, the school you taught at Wombly, was it the same one your parents had taught at? Or was it a different school?
I didn't teach in the Indian school, no. They, my parents also, after they quit the Indian department, then they taught some in the public schools.
Mhm.
In fact, for a year or so, my father was superintendent as well as being a teacher because of the shortage of teachers. And,
You mentioned your wedding year again. Was it 1930?
33. You see, I was married before,
Uh-huh.
and then that summer after I had gone back to school, and then I came home to Wombly 2 years later, and I started teaching again then.
When you and Mr. Burkholder were married, did you move out here to the place in 1933?
Yes, we did.
Uh-huh. Did this house exist at that time in
Not this
1933?
one, no, but we had a log house.
One of your many, huh?
One of my many homes I've built up here.
I know that you two have done an awful lot to contribute to the community around here, and I know also, Ethel, that you were the superintendent of schools for a while too.
For 4 years, yes.
Uh-huh. And was this after you were married? Or was
Oh,
this-
Yes,
yeah.
it was. It was, I had taught, see, altogether, I've done all of my teaching in this area.
Mhm.
And in Washaba or
Except that
Jackson
one
County.
year.
Being the superintendent of schools, was that of what schools did that encompass?
Washaba County District.
Okay.
Mhm.
Uh-huh. And at that time you were also teaching?
No, I had been teaching in Interior.
How many years total did you teach in Interior?
I don't know exactly, it must have been 7 or 8, something like that. See, I taught in Interior. Then I went to Kadoka and taught. The teaching job in Interior got to be a little heavy because the last year I taught here at that time, I had the 4 upper grades, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And I think I had 27 pupils. And it was just too heavy a load.
Oh, yes.
And so I had this opportunity to teach in the 3rd grade in Kadoka,
Mhm.
which I enjoyed the lower grades more anyway. And so I went down there and taught, and our youngest daughter was in high school then at that time, so
Mhm.
she went too, and that way she could take piano lessons. And
Well, this community owes you a lot for all the teaching that you've given, and you will never be forgotten for that at all.
Well.
Another thing is the church. I know that Rolla and also Halley and Ethel, you all have contributed to the church. When was the church built in Interior, the present building?
I believe it was the present building. I still-
Dedicated in 1911, I think.
In our cookbook, it's, I have it packed.
That's right. It is 1911, I think, from what
1911.
Dedicated in 1911.
Was there a church, Presbyterian church there before that? Or was
Yes.
that? Probably your family might have attended that. I don't know if they did or not, Rolla, but there was a church there.
Old churches down there by Snodgrass, Old Row East
Yeah,
Snodgrass.
that was a Methodist one.
Oh, that is a Methodist.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute, I just, in the early days there was a traveling salesman. His wife was, he married a Salvation Army, and he was a traveling salesman. He comes through, every 2 weeks he'd come through, and they didn't have the school building, what it was there. And Jim Six ran the saloon. And he had quite a reputation. And he'd announce then that there's going to be church service tonight, and put his hand down and we will go to church. And the saloon closed up and they went to church.
Well, that's probably a pretty good way to do it.
Yes, Rolla's folks attended, and his mother
Yeah.
was a Sunday school
They
teacher.
formed a Presbyterian church after that, I guess.
And his sister Irene was baptized in White River.
Oh, in the river itself.
Mhm.
I'll be darned. As when you were raising your family, Ethel and Rolla, I imagine there were a lot of things that you thought of about trying to give your children the best education possible and experiences such as playing the piano and everything like that. Did you ever find it difficult to do that, living in an isolated area, or what some people might think is somewhat isolated?
It was difficult. We did try to give them some advantage in piano lessons. When anyone came into the community who could play the piano, we would try to get them to teach the children to play, and they all took piano lessons
What are the
at
names
different times. But
What are the names of your children?
well, I have two daughters. When Rolla and I were married, Patricia and Mary. And then we had the twins, twin sons, John and Bill, and Marcia and Sharon.
6 children then,
6
that
children.
you've raised.
Right.
And done a very fine job on too. Did you ever take family picnics up in the Badlands as a family when your children were young?
That was one of our Sunday excursions, was a picnic, not so much in the
It wasn't-
Badlands
it wasn't
as
so
out
much-
In the community.
in the
It wasn't
community.
so much family picnics in those days, it was community picnics.
Oh, yes. Potlucks on Sunday
Yeah,
Sunday
yeah.
socials, probably.
We'd go different places, some places
Yeah.
to different ranch, or some places, sometimes down the river, some over in Bear Creek, different places.
That was in the real early days.
Yes.
Did you ever spend much time, or did your children hiking in the Badlands or being in the
Not me, no.
Mm.
No, I don't hike in
Well,
no
I know,
Badlands.
those Badlands.
They all
Different.
did lots of hiking in the Badlands. I could tell you a little story. We just expected they would get along fine. They would go with the boys would go with some of their friends out to hike in the Badlands. We're going up to hike in the Badlands, Mom. Okay, take care. Where are you going? Over to Boy Scout Cave. Well, that word, I'd never been to Boy Scout Cave, but I thought, well, Boy Scout Cave, it must be all right. But so they made lots of trips over to Boy Scout Cave to go hiking. When I was teaching the upper grades there in Interior, we decided to take a little field trip one Friday afternoon. And in discussing where to go, someone said, let's go to Boy Scout Cave. Well, I thought that would be fine. I didn't know where it was, but we'd go over there. So we walked across from Interior over to Boy Scout Cave. Well, when we got to Boy Scout Cave, I saw what it was, and I thought, oh my, we can't stay here. So it wasn't long till we found a reason to go back home. It looked,
When you leave the park up there, go around the bend, that's the road turns off Interior, go around there, it's off there, it's right back up in there.
Was it a very large cave?
well, it was lots of caverns under there.
Oh,
You
yeah.
didn't know what was
Underground drainage type.
underground.
Mhm.
And the children were all excited, but
Oh,
I
sure.
didn't. I was excited, but not in
You
that way.
had known that's where they were going all this time.
You didn't know when a rock was gonna fall on her head.
Uh-huh.
So we soon got out of there and came back.
Well, but you have been here as a married couple then for 47 years. As
Yes,
a married couple.
right.
And
We
now you're...
spent some time in town when Rolla first was on the mail route. We
Well, their family, they'd been in town to school there while I was still out here, they'd come out on weekends.
So most of the time you were having your mail route, you
And
were
then
teaching.
after
yes, I was.
Probably was easier to live in town during that time, that you still had your place out here, just because of the children being in school.
At first, Rolla stayed out here, and that was when after the bridge had washed out, he'd come in and carry milk and eggs and garden stuff over the swinging
See, they had a
bridge.
swinging bridge after that bridge went out. Cable
Over
bridge.
west of Interior, until they got the new bridge built.
Well, you know, we are facing a move soon too, and I'm having a lot of nostalgic feelings about leaving because I've only been here 3.5 years, but I really have a lot of love for this country and a lot of people here. So I can imagine the feelings you're going through after living here for such a long time. And I sure wish you luck in your new home too.
Well, thank you very much. It is hard. I think probably harder for Rolla than for me, except that I have been involved in the area for a good many years too, and involved in the lives of a great many people. After teaching for 25 years in a small area, it becomes pretty much a part of your life.
Before talking to Halley, there's one more thing I wanted to ask you, especially you, Mr. Burkholder. I imagine in the early years there was a lot more wildlife around than you have now.
Oh, yes.
And did you ever have an opportunity to see a black-footed ferret?
To do what?
To see a black-footed ferret?
I saw one black-footed ferret. Yeah, it was
In
dead.
all
It was dead.
It was dead.
And the only reason I happen to know, there's a big dog town up here, and Vernon Young had setting traps. And one day he came pulling in, had a thing on the end of his throat, dragging it in here. You want to know what that is? He said, it isn't a mink, and he said, it looks like a weasel, but I know darn well it isn't a weasel. Well, just a week or so before that, I'd got a postal card picture from, I don't know, government service, some branch of government service, wildlife service, of a picture of a black-footed ferret, that they were extinct and becoming extinct, and by never to trap or kill them or anything, and notify them if you saw one or things like that. And so I told him I knew what it was, and then afterward there's a government trapper lived at Wheaton. He'd go back and forth, and he'd had him on batching days, of course, and he'd make it stay over at my place over on a trip one way over overnight. And so he told me a lot about the history of them. And then afterwards I saw one live in the town. There were two of them moved into the town up here in this dog town, but it disappeared afterwards. So.
Did you ever have a lot of deer on your place or
No,
antelope?
the deer don't run up here.
You don't run any antelope at all?
I've seen a couple. Ethel got a picture she took through the window. A couple came out here on the lawn here just a few years ago, a doe and a fawn. But otherwise, the deer run up in these canyons back there.
Generally speaking, has this area changed a lot? You know, I'm directing this to all three of you. Has this area changed a lot in the lifetimes you've spent here?
Oh, in some ways,
In some ways, yes, in some.
it's changed, and some ways for the better, and a lot of ways to me it's for the worse.
I'm sure you recall when Interior was a more thriving town than it is now.
Oh,
Yes.
oh my!
Yes.
I'm going to switch over to the other side.